Hello and welcome to another episode of our skin education sessions or skin education series. This is episode number 22 and I myself, Kathleen, I'll be talking to you all about sun care, SPF, and kind of kicking off this little mini series within the series. So you might have seen a little bit earlier today, hello Stephanie, that I released the schedule for the rest of 2019. Crazy to think 2019 is wrapping up already. But I'll be talking about sunscreen for this episode and the next two, and then a couple of episodes after that. Hello Grace, how are you? Oh, that's very sweet of you to say that. Thank you. And for the next episodes after that, we're actually going to be diving into pigmentation. So it's definitely important to be talking about pigmentation when you're talking about the sun, because the sun really does bring out the worst in our skin, and particularly pigmentation. So yeah, let's just dive into this. And really for today's episode, I wanted to keep it as more of like a casual chat and more of a real talk, because next week we're going to go into the nitty gritties about how to bring sunscreen into your life so you are getting all the benefits, or at least avoiding all the harsh consequences. Today we're really just discussing the sun and maybe some little lifestyle hacks as well. But if you are completely new to this concept of, sun avoidance and why we should be really avoiding the sun like the plague, and don't take me word for word because I love the sun, I absolutely do, but we really, if you're thinking about your skin, and if I was to, just be really single out the skin and go, you know what, if I'm just focusing on my skin and nothing else in my life matters, I wouldn't be going in the sun at all. Maybe a little tiny bit with a little bit of sunscreen, but basically that's because whenever you're exposed to UV radiation, essentially your skin cells are dying. Your skin cells are essentially being damaged from the sun. So we all know about sun safety and how we're meant to slip, slop, slap and avoid sun cancers, but did you know that the sun is actually aging you quicker than almost anything else that you could be exposed to? It's right up there with smoking cigarettes. And I think in Australia we do have a bit of a we want to be in the sun, and we have grown up, I think the generation before us more so I'm 27. My parents, they were sun bunnies. It was all about, spend time in the sun, get a nice tan, and it was like a sign of health. Whereas now we're a little bit more educated. We are avoiding the sun more so. We just didn't realize back then how much the sun actually ages you, and it really does. It leaves you vulnerable to sun cancers and other kinds of cancers from that as well. So I guess when you put it like that, there are two major things. It's like your aesthetics for one, which is your actual skin and how it appears, but then you've actually got your health and the risk of developing melanomas, which is something you really don't want to be messing about with. So I think if you really didn't care about how your skin looks, then that's totally fine. You don't have to think that way, but you still should consider these tips just for your health. I had a young woman in my clinic the other day. She's my age, I went to school with her, and she had a melanoma. So, from years back, and obviously I'll keep her identity private, but it just goes to show, no one is really immune. She spent times in solariums and things like this as well. And she's not the only story. I hear this all the time with older women. So yeah, we really, really do need to be careful, because someone in their 20s can develop skin-related cancers. So we got a little bit dark and scary there for a moment, but essentially that's what we're really involved with here. The sun is going to age you really, really quickly. So it's going to age you in the forms of, it's going to essentially, your collagen is going to kind of your collagen kind of keeps your skin nice and plump, right? And it keeps the structures all pushed up. But then when your collagen is being damaged, it's kind of just like the webbing in between. Like the kind of, actually you can think of a mattress. You know how when you have those spring mattresses and they're nice and plump, and then they start to kind of sag down and you've got those little, divots in the mattress. Hello, Margarita. So that's a kind of good analogy for collagen, and the sun will essentially squish out collagen quicker. It'll also make your skin less elastic, so it'll kind of that saggy look on the skin. It'll also create excess keratinization, so that will present on a skin with a really thickened, kind of leathery, tough look to it. And it, of course, will pigment the skin. Whether it does that regularly or irregularly is really up to the genetics of the person. Some people will tan very, very evenly, so they will just get darker. So that's why we get a tan, right? It's because the melanin and the melanocytes in our skin cells is basically like a skin barrier defense. And it sends the pigment up to the top of the cells to actually create a bit of a shield for the lower levels of the cells. So some people will tan nice and evenly and they'll have that beautiful brown glow that we all wish we had, but that doesn't always stay that way. It can actually end up becoming pigmented with patches. We might get sololatingis, all different kinds of pigmentation disorders. But if you're really unlucky and you pigment in an irregular way, perhaps that might come up as freckles, that might come up as I was going to say melasma, but that's just a whole nother ball game, and we're going to cover that topic, in the coming weeks. But you might just get lots of different patches of pigment. I know I've seen, I look after clients here that have these pigment patches all over their skin. So that is how essentially the sun will age you. It'll create pigment, it'll create signs of aging, and all of those things, hello Amy, and all of those things together will make you look older than what you are. So you'll notice. So, and I'm not trying to be say it's a bad thing at all, and I'm not trying to make anyone feel like they should feel bad for having sun damage, because look, I have sun damage, we all gonna have sun damage, and we all have different priorities, right? But look at some people around you that have spent a lot of time in the sun. Check out the backs of their hand, check out their chest, check out their neck, their face, and the backs of their neck. Actually, that's a really good one, because you'll be able to see the differences between, the stomach or the torso of how differently sun will age you. That didn't make sense, sorry. How these areas that have been covered and not covered, how differently they age. There's a really good photo that you can look up. I think the first one is an example of twins. So one was in the sun a lot and one wasn't, and you would see their age side by side. You would think one is at least 15 years older, and it's because she's been in the sun. There's another great photo example. You can just Google all of these as well. One of this truck driver, and his whole life on the driver's side, consistently drove a truck, and you can see one side of his face literally looks like it's melting. So, I mean, he's aged on both sides because he's been exposed to the sun, never wore sun SPF at all, but it literally is kind of just like sagging down. It's just the collagen and elastin, and you can see one side of the face is prominently aged, and that's due to being on that driver's side of the car. And I guess this really does lead me to my next point. Is it just when you're out in the sun? Is that when you're being damaged, or is it in other circumstances? And I'm here to tell you that unfortunately you're not really safe in many circumstances. So we do know you can, so UV rays pass through windows, certain types of windows. So, when you're up in a plane, you're obviously closer to the UV rays. They actually have like sun protection glass, so you actually don't Oh, actually, I think I might be wrong there. I was getting that confused with the astronauts. So when you're up in space, they actually have a special type of glass. I don't think they invest that money for airplanes. If there's anyone that knows much about airplanes, let me know. But I'm sure they would have an extra filter on the airplanes to compensate for being higher up, closer to the rays. But yeah, definitely in spaceships. Oh my goodness, I can't talk today. When you go up into space, right, they have to put ultraviolet protection glassware, so you're not literally being burnt instantly from the UV rays. So down here on Earth, back to us, if you sit next to a window, which I do while I'm working, that sun that's coming in, you're going to get damage. Of course, it's going to be filtered through that window, but you still are. When you're driving to and from work, when there's clouds, when it's raining, if the sun is out, you're going to be getting a level of UV ray damage. And this is why we have that, there's usually in the weather report, they have it changes every day how high the UV rays are and how much you could potentially be damaged. Something to check out, between 11 and 3 p.m. is kind of your danger zone where you don't want to be out in that full sun. So here we have it, when we're out in the sun with the rain, all kinds of clouds. Whenever it is daylight, there is sun damage occurring next to a window, in your car. You can actually, and the thing is, I wish I could articulate this the right way. I haven't done enough research into it. I'm really only passing on information from other professionals in the industry. But basically, you can still get UV damage when we're talking about our phones and computer screens. And I'm not exactly sure how this works, but it does. And I do know for a fact that there are a lot of different skincare companies now trying to formulate different kinds of sun protection chemicals to be able to block from these specific UV rays that you can get from your computer screen. So gosh, that's all for another topic and something I'll definitely dive into research on another day. But just with all that being said, makes you realize, if your priority is to age gracefully and have the most healthiest skin possible, then you do have to take precautions. Now, you don't need to be crazy, you don't need to be, over the top when it comes to sunscreen. Dare I say, my friends and family do think I'm a little bit crazy on this topic, and they're always like, oh, Kat with her SPF again. But when I leave the house, without a doubt, I'm not leaving the house unless I have sunscreen on my face, on my ears, on my neck, on the backs of my hand, on my arm, on my chest, and on my neck. And this is basically because I don't want to just be protecting my face and then get to about 60 or 70 years old and then have my skin on my face still look quite young and lovely, and then the rest of my body be aged as well. I would like to age evenly in that respect, and I would like to also protect myself from the sun. So that is my golden rule. And the thing is, when it comes to sunscreen, it's actually quite complicated, and there are so many different chemicals out there. And when we see all these articles, hello Mary, and I think there's a lot of scare factor around sunscreen because people are wanting to go a little bit more natural these days, and I completely understand that, and I'm all for natural ingredients. But sometimes when we don't have advanced knowledge on cosmetic chemistry, we can get misunderstood by what we're actually reading. So there are a lot of people out there that are they really only want a natural sunscreen, which is usually a zinc oxide or a titanium dioxide base, which is from minerals, and that is called a natural sunscreen, essentially, or referred to. It's also called a physical block. But then we also have other types of sunscreens which we refer to as chemical blockers. And people are a little bit afraid of using these chemical blockers, and I think there is definitely some justified reasons, but there is also reasons to for and against both, and I guess I'll tell you my opinion on it probably next week when I talk to you more about using sunscreen. But essentially, when it comes down to it, you're better off wearing a sunscreen than not wearing sunscreen at all. I would much rather you wear, if you're going to be out in the sun, I'd much rather you wear a low quality sunscreen than go out there and get burnt and get damaged, because that is more harmful in the long run. So I never leave the house without my sunscreen, and if I'm spending a long amount of time outside, I'll definitely be taking it with me and reapplying throughout the day. And you really just have to, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. You don't have to be, really like, it's 1 hour, I must reapply my sunscreen. You get to feel and you'll get to know, and you don't have to plan your day rigidly. So if I'm, say, going out in the morning and, I'm going to drive to work and I'm going to go for a walk down the beach before I get to work, I'm going to wear a sunscreen. But if I know I'm going to be doing, a long walk, and then I'm going to sit out at a cafe, and then I'm going to walk back, things like this, and then I'm going to be outside doing some gardening, I'm going to be reapplying my sunscreen. That is for sure. Hello, Jess. So it's good in summer to actually carry around a sunscreen in your handbag. I know there are a lot of tips out there where they say keep one in your car, and I actually think that is a ridiculous idea. I think keeping a sunscreen in your car is really just a recipe for disaster. Think about how hot your car gets. Think about this is basically sunscreens, or all skincare products essentially are made up of oils and water and certain chemicals and then bind it all together, and it's just going to essentially, it's not going to preserve as well, it's not going to be at its best, maybe something will become inactive. I really wouldn't be messing around in that regard. Keep it in your handbag, that's the best thing you can do. And like I said, we're going to talk more next week on the chemical and the natural based skin SPFs, but essentially you just need one. And there is a very big difference between the Cancer Council or your home brand sunscreens that you slap on before a soccer or a footy game, or those big zinc blocks, compared to wearing something that you enjoy wearing on a daily basis. The way I like to refer to this is that it has to be cosmetically elegant. So you enjoy wearing it. It's a nice film. It doesn't leave your skin feeling like slick grease, because if you've got a sunscreen like that, I guarantee you will have no motivation to wear it. So the next kind of question on this topic, and I will probably go a little bit more into detail next week, is, am I being protected if I'm wearing my makeup that says it's got an SPF rating? And this is definitely something, it's good that you have an SPF rating in your makeup, but the thing is, there has actually been a cosmetic chemist, she's not a cosmetic chemist, she is a PhD graduate of something to do with chemistry. I can't remember her exact title, but she has a skincare channel, and basically she conducted an experiment where she weighed out the exact amounts of mineral makeup that would need to be required to actually get the SPF rating that you desire. And basically, thinking about a powder foundation and how much you would need of that to actually get the 15 SPF, it's actually unrealistic, and you would not be applying that amount of essentially a foundation to be getting that higher of a rating. So my point here is, don't rely on your makeup for your sun protection. You need a separate sunscreen. Sometimes you can get away with, and this is why I'm holding the Dermavisuals ones, I really like these, it's the SPF 30 and a 15. Sometimes you can get away with, depending on your skin, depending on the formulation, of having them both in the same thing, so a moisturizer and a sunscreen in the same bottle. And I can get away with this with my skin at the moment. It's not awfully dry. Sometimes I need a couple of different layers, maybe a toner and a serum, and then my sunscreen. But if you can get it all in one, then even better. This is the only thing you need to make sure you're doing, is actually wearing enough because if you're just using a tiny little amount of sunscreen and essentially expecting it to give you the coverage that it says it will, you're probably thinning out the entire mixture and you're not getting that full coverage. And I guess the other thing that we really need to consider is the amount of time that you spend in the sun versus the actual skin type that you have. So I'm talking your Fitzpatrick skin type. And basically the Fitzpatrick skin typing is a scale. It's starting at the most fairest, lighter skins up to the darker skins, and basically every person will be somewhere on this scale. Everyone that comes to see me for an appointment here at Soul Awaken, as of recently, has now been skin typed in the Fitzpatrick scale, because I want them to be informed about where they sit on the scale, because when you know this, you'll know your estimated burn time. So for example, someone that has red hair with freckles, with really light skin, they are definitely a Fitzpatrick 1, so the lightest kind. And to be quite honest, they can't spend more than about 10 minutes in the sun without being burnt. Whereas maybe you would have a Fitzpatrick type 3. Now, I think I personally fall somewhere between 2 and 3. 3 is generally a little bit darker than me, but I think I do kind of fall into 3 personally, because I do have that Mediterranean background and I just don't burn as a Fitzpatrick 2 would. So we're all on a kind of a spectrum. And being on a Fitzpatrick 3, let's say, you might have an hour until you burn. I think that's a little bit far-fetched. It's probably more about 30 minutes until you burn. It really just depends on the level of the rays on that day. What you're doing, is it being filtered through a window, whatever. But it's really important to find out where you are on that scale, so you know your exact burn time, because when you know your burn time, you'll know when you have to reapply. And on the back of sunscreen bottles, they basically say reapply every 2 to 4 hours, and that is just a general rating. You really need to get to know your skin and be able to pick up on those signs when you know you're being burnt. I can feel it. I really got to know my skin pretty well while I was in Thailand for a month, and I could just feel when my skin has gotten past that point of, we're going to burn now, we're getting damage, and you will feel it. It's this kind of hot, almost tickly. You actually start to feel in your body, health-wise, you actually start to feel a little bit more lethargic than you had before. You don't feel energized by the sun, you actually feel like, by the sun. And I don't think we'll pick up on those feelings when they're happening. So it's really important to find out your unique burn time, so then you can implement your sunscreen where necessary and essentially to suit your lifestyle. Oh goodness, I feel like I've just been rambling for the last 25 minutes, but I really just wanted to give you all the basics, all the things you really need to consider when it comes to the sun, because once you've got those down packed, you can basically make these decisions for yourself on a whim. I don't think about sun like SPF every day. I think put it on and then go about my day, and I just always make sure I have a couple on hand. I like having a 30 and a 15 to be able to choose what type of day I'm going out to enjoy and always having one on hand. And kind of while I'm on that, I do just want to mention that you cover your face, your ears, your body, all of those areas, but you actually want to make sure that you're covering your lips. Now, your lips can get burnt, and we all know this. I found in the past some lip balms that do contain SPF in them. I found them really intolerable, to be quite honest. I always felt like they left kind of like a white film on my lips, and I never really enjoyed them. But what I do now is I actually put the sun cream onto my lips, and it's absolutely fine. But remember, because you're drinking and you're eating, it'll be worn off a lot quicker. And all sunscreen will be worn off a lot quicker, depending on whether it's water resistant, whether it is sweat proof, all of these things, right? So there's so many things to consider. At the end of the day, sunscreen is very, very important, and you're better off preventing the damage before actually trying to rectify the damage later on, because treating pigmentation, treating aging, it is a little bit of a losing battle, because, for example, when you're treating pigmentation, and not all pigmentation disorders, of course, and not all cases, but pretty much when you're treating pigmentation, you're getting rid of it on the surface, and then you're suppressing the supply, and you're pretty much telling your melanocytes to behave and to not produce all this pigment. But the thing is, it can just be triggered like that, just with a little bit of sun, just with a bit of extra exposure. So you're better off not triggering those melanocyte cells in the first place, and actually just preventing them from getting like that in the end, because it can get really expensive trying to treat pigmentation, and especially aging. So with all that being said, I really hope you're at least considering wearing sunscreen and considering all the other things that around sunscreen. I'm going to be talking about, is it okay, to get a tan, how to implement sunscreen into your life, as in what types, the natural versus chemical. We're going to talk about just those things that you really need to know, because this is more things you need to know as in generally about sunscreen, but you need to know how to put it into your life, how to make it applicable, how to use the knowledge to your benefit. So I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If you do have any questions, this is your time. Pop them down below. I do have a couple of moments, and if I haven't answered it in today, and you comment a little bit later in the night when you're perhaps rewatching this, still pop it down there, because I will be able to implement it in one of the upcoming episodes. Now I'll just have a little look here to see. Hello to everyone who's still watching. Hello, Kelly. And I don't know if you guys can see, actually, this is a good example. You see those little 3 dots on my lips just there? That's actually freckles that recently came up on my lips because of sun damage. And it's really hard to get rid of them in the first place. If I was a little bit more diligent with putting sunscreen on my lips, particularly while I was in Thailand for that month, I actually think this came up because of that. Now that I kind of backtrack when it came up and things like that, I probably could have prevented it, because I remembered my lips got severely burnt. I remember it was just like, we were on it was beautiful actually, we were on a boat, and just that wind, and it was like, oh, it feels so nice feeling the wind in my face. But the next day it was like, oh, my lips. So that is it from me. If you have questions, pop them down below. I'll answer them next week. And I really, really look forward to talking to you more about how you can implement sunscreen into your life so that you can age gracefully and just really minimize the chances of getting some sort of sun damage, sun cancer, or melanoma. I love being here with you, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. If you have any skincare questions, just message me. You're more than welcome to, and we can set up a phone consult. We can talk about your skin. I can answer your questions, and even if you like, you can come in to get your skin checked and have a full consultation and diagnosis. It takes 45 minutes at the minimum, and it is $69 to have that done. So it is an absolute bargain, and you will walk away with so much knowledge and so much empowerment. So that is an option if you want to learn some more about your skin. But that's it from me, guys. I'll see you all next week for episode number 23.